Hello, hello, hello. So here I am again, doing another one of those sessions where I take one of these pictures and I just talk about whatever memory comes up. Because of course, the faces I've been drawing in these pictures are generally things from my own past. And the thing is that, yeah, some of these faces belong to people. Some of these I have let go. Wow. Just a sec. So, I would just like to tell you a story. Okay, so during my 20s, I had a friend who I met during studies. And we did a lot of hiking together. And a lot of sports, like playing frisbee and stuff, like really insane sessions. And there was something weird about that friend. Because as much as I liked him, at a certain point I started to change quite drastically after my time in Africa. And for some reason, he always made it like something to be very important that he wanted to see me, while I didn't really feel like seeing him anymore. And one of the feelings I had, because sometimes I see people and they present themselves as a certain someone, but when you get to know them, you also begin to realize that they aren't really who they claim to be. And that's the thing about me, where I have the feeling, I'm a bit different, because some people, they always act like they're doing really good when you see them, but when they're alone, they're completely different people. They have really weird thoughts, or, what's weird, but different from what they show you in day-to-day life. But somehow I was able to pick up certain things about people, and there was something about him that every time I was talking to him, in front of my inner eye, I started having an image of something like, these fish in aquariums that clean the glass, or that always hang with their lips on the glass. Something like a leech without sharp teeth. And I was feeling like every time I was talking to him, he was basically, with his big, fat, juicy lips, he was basically hanging on my ears, like sucking me dry. And I had trouble to deal with this because I had no idea what that meant. And then there was a certain phase in my life, because I did try to take him along the path that I had started to walk. After I came from Africa, I was a different person. I had faced like some kind of severe depression. And while I was struggling along my own life, he wanted to cling to me as somebody that makes him feel good. And so quite often he would call me whenever he felt bad about himself. And then he would ask me, how's your life? What are you doing? What's great about your life? And, this sometimes made me very angry, because because he called me, right? And then he wanted me to tell him something. Talking is quite exhausting, which is why I also have to make sure I have enough energy available, or power, as I have started calling it after listening to the audiobooks, you can't really say by Carlos Castaneda, by Journey to Islam. That just opened my eyes to a different term, power. And he always said that, he just likes to hang around with me because, I'm different than everybody, but I never understood why. Because to me, I was just myself. But that's already the difference. Most people, they're quite miserable, but they act like they're not. So they're deceiving you. And while I was, sometimes grumpy, sometimes happy, sometimes I was an asshole, but somehow I always pushed through. I never gave up. I always pushed through. And, when I didn't feel miserable or shit, or was angry, which I still am sometimes, because I'm an emotional being, and if there's an emotion that needs to come out, I'll smash it into your face. But at least it's honest. And somehow he appreciated that about me. But when I started to tell him, that I had made certain experiences with psychedelics, it began to show that I was starting to change quite dramatically, while he was still the same. He was changing in his own way. But somehow, whatever happened, it just grew us apart. And whether or not that is something final remains to be seen. But at least for the time being, I can say, I just told him to leave me alone and to never call me again. Because I tried explaining it to him, but he just kept contacting me. And that was one of the choices I made in my life, where I said to a person that I had known for a couple of years, which had helped me to outgrow myself, because he was quite expertised, you could say, in the outdoors. Going hiking, cycling. He introduced me to a world of exercise that I had never known. And in that sense, he made me strong. But also, I made him strong. I introduced him to barefoot walking and hiking, which he picked up. Whether or not he still does it, I can't say. And the way I see it, when I look at this image, I see somebody who's very sad. And who is always on the verge of tears. And he had this habit of, when somebody would talk to him about a sad topic, he would just start laughing, and he didn't know why. Well, guess what? Laughing is a form of crying. If you want to watch a comedy, something to make you laugh, you are actually crying. Well, that's something to blow your mind, because it's just a way to release energy. Well, A better way of releasing energy would be to look at why you want to watch a comedy right now, you know? What kind of happiness is missing in your life and what's dragging you down? And if you have family members that are sick or have died or, are in a state of like constant depression, well, you cannot change that. Because the only thing you can do is change yourself and accept the fact that some people will die. And that, if you have a certain perspective on dis-ease, on sickness, then you can say or form the opinion that sickness or disease is nothing but your body trying to work with energy that is inside your body. That's like your body trying to get rid of things. And if you have a lot of negativity in yourself, anger, sadness, like negative emotions, if you're trying to push out greed, well, greed can be something to follow in a certain way. If you say, I want to be greedy for love, right? Try to the point where you feel it's enough now. I've eaten all the things that I wanted to eat until I felt like now I don't feel like it anymore. So you live your life to the fullest. That's what it means. You're greedy for life. So that when you get to the end of it, you can just let go because you say, I've done it all. I fucking did it, mate. Instead of just wasting away at home in this state of mediocrity and sadness and like, my father died of cancer. Yeah, well, you can say that for the rest of your life and maybe you'll die of cancer too. But, the way to go is to figure out why it's such a bad thing. Was he really happy? Death is also something that is going to liberate the spirit. And if you're talking about karma and all these kinds of things, which, I don't really concern myself a lot with ideas of karma. But I do know that in some way it exists. So you can say, look at it. The world has been in turmoil. There's been so much negativity. Everybody's just having a go at everybody. People raping each other, fucking each other, killing each other, being jealous at each other. Everybody's kind of an asshole these days. And that just means, it's being handed down from generation to generation. That's how it starts. There's like a war. Something nobody can predict, it just happens. Suddenly there's a war. And maybe your grandfather was fighting in a war. And he was heavily traumatized because he killed guys. Maybe he killed children. Maybe he had to, torture people. All because, he was thinking he did the right thing. Whether it was right or wrong, maybe it felt right in the moment. Whatever. Because it's also like a rush of power to take a life. That's how you feel like maybe when you slaughtered a chicken before or something. But anyway, and then he gets back to his family. And now suddenly he starts feeling bad about all these things that he did. It's like cheating on your wife or cheating on your husband. And the moment you're doing it, it's like, quite liberating. But when you get back to your spouse, then you have to deal with this. Because then you will suddenly feel tremendous guilt and shame. Because now you're trying to love the person, but you also know you've cheated. Well, the only thing you can do then is to accept that you've cheated and either make yourself, comfortable with the idea of you having cheated, but then also realizing, why did I cheat? And then you can communicate it. And you can either tell your spouse the truth, or you just keep it to yourself and just work it out for yourself. And just say, okay, that's a lesson for me. Now I will open up to her again. Maybe just one time I needed to get away from this kind of relationship. And then you just start by working out why you did it. And then you also have to make up your mind. Do you actually still want to be with that person? But that's not really where I'm going with this, but that's where, I'm going with it. And now imagine this grandfather coming home with all this shame and guilt of having killed and seeing death and all that kind of stuff. And maybe he tries talking about it, but nobody wants to hear it because it's uncomfortable. Because they don't know how to deal with their own emotions. So why, how should they know how to deal with that man's emotions? So maybe he starts to drink alcohol because it numbs the pain. And then he lets it out on his children. And he starts beating them and beating them and beating them. And now, because one man went to war and killed, children now need to suffer because he doesn't know what to do with his emotions. But also because the state, doesn't really care. They wanted to conquer other people. So the people had to help the state do it, because that's the state's greed for power by suppression or oppression. Or maybe repression, right? I don't know. But they don't, they don't really care how the soldiers feel like. They just take them and they send them back, like people are their property. Well, and then children get beaten up. Bam, 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 right? Day after day after day. Well, and what do you think those children are going to do to their children? Well, maybe they'll never leave that behind them. And now these children have children, and then they have children, and maybe you are somewhere in that succession of whatever, of violence. And now it's up to you to grow above it, to rise above it, to face that all of this has happened, to see the connections in your own family. Okay, people have died, people were sad, people have done atrocious things, but they did whatever they had to do, and that's then accepting it. Because for whatever reason, that grandfather felt like he had no choice but to obey, so he obeyed. And that's just how it is. I mean, you don't really know what's happening. All you know is, what you see around you, and instead of running away from it and, run to women or run to comedies or watch Netflix all day or order things on the internet or just, just have sex or drink alcohol or, shoot yourself up with whatever you use. You can also just sit down and allow yourself to see and feel these things, to make the connection to how you feel today in relation to how everybody else felt all their lives. And then you may begin to realize, as I have, that the people in my surroundings often felt quite bad because they had maybe a lot of sadness in their life. So they did the best they could to raise me. And now it's my own self-responsibility to say, okay, that's as happy as they could be. Let's see how happy I can be if I take charge of my own feelings now. And I make an effort to feel and to be, but also to understand, why it all turned out that way. And that means when you look at everything that is potentially making you sad in your life and trace it down back to, I don't know, maybe 3 to 4 generations of your ancestors. I don't think you really have to go further than that. To me, it was about also listening to some of the stories of my elders and then relating it back to me. Okay, this is how it was when they were young, because a lot of old people, they don't really talk about these traumatizing experiences. But in the way it shaped them, and it shaped the way they raised you and the way they deal with other people. But that's probably not going to change. All you can do is disassociate yourself from the experiences you've had through other people, because they were probably just projecting their own feelings onto you, and they probably needed that so they could let go of themselves sometimes and feel better about themselves. The reason why people are so obsessive with young children, and they want to squeeze their cheeks because they're so soft and, nothing bad has yet happened to them. Well, except for you squeezing their cheeks with cold hands or something, poking at them to get to their warmth, to their lightful spirit inside. And, the more you are running away from your own traumatic past, the worse it's gonna get for you. And in the end, you might find yourself in some underground, devil worshipper circle, sacrificing children or doing whatever. So instead of doing this, you can just confront all that sadness inside of you, until it's done.